she died. Everyone, just in those few words of hers, those 2 sentences, I think we find a very rich field for reflection on the whole idea of forgiveness, because to forgive is as much an act of justice as it is an act of mercy, and we learn from this sister, it's never, ever easy to do. I think it is rather difficult for us, to have a real good understanding of authentic forgiveness, perhaps in part because we don't have a very good sense of what can truly hurt ourselves and others and can truly offend God. I mean, we have a poor sense of what sin truly can be. Now, we easily tend to think that forgiveness means denying that evil or sin even exists, and we do that in a number of ways. I think, for instance, there is a tremendous fearfulness to pronounce something as sinful, in our times especially, because it might be taken as judgmentalism. Now, here's the thing. We are cautioned by the Lord himself not to judge people, but we are commanded by him to speak the truth about actions that can separate us from God and can hurt ourselves and others. It's a difficult distinction for many souls to make in our times. But everyone often, I think, is just that we can't stand to feel like someone else may not like us or may not agree with us, and so it's easier to deny the reality of what evil and sin can truly be and do. And in any other part of life, that would be taken as moral weakness. Now, if we refuse to point out the ways that lead to God and the ways that lead away from him, is that moral leadership? And is that not what Christians are called to do in the life of the world? Now, there are other ways I think we can distort the meaning of real forgiveness. I remember working with a man who was passed over for a promotion, and very unfairly at that. Now, when he would deal with his superiors and the individual who got the job over him, he'd go out of his way to be agreeable and charming, and the expression on his face and that clenched smile and that forced look, all it did was clearly communicate, I hate you. Okay? To his wife and his co-workers, what would he do? He'd vent and rage against these people to whom not just minutes before he was going out of his way to be kind to. Now, our psychologist priest friend might call it passive aggression. I would call it being fake, and it's terrible. We're almost expected to dismiss faults, failures, sins very carelessly, dismiss, but not forgive. And what happens is that it often lodges deep in the soul and then rears its ugly head down the line, and we start seeing faults everywhere and in everyone. But we have to maintain this fake facade of nice, and it's awful, and it's common. Everyone, sometimes I've heard talk about unconditional acceptance of others, and it's a lovely concept. It really is, and it works only in theory, because then we run into a real person. Different, of course, from the ones who live in our imaginary world, but a real person who may have deeply hurt and offended us. Well, then the unconditional love vanishes, and we go to pieces. I've actually heard people say, I am a very accepting and forgiving person, but what she did, what he said, how she acts, how he thinks, it's unforgivable. A certain amount of contradiction to be found in those words. Careful what we say sometimes. This might give us some insight into the words that our Lord used very often. Hypocrisy. Most of us think when we hear the word hypocrisy, it means the old not practicing what we preach. And that, too, is a very easy idea to toss around carelessly. I've known dozens of individuals who take delight in labeling people who practice their religion as hypocrites, labeling people who they don't like or agree with as hypocrites. And once again, I believe the good Lord issued a rather stern warning against judging